Have you ever woken up on a sluggish morning, looked at your to-do list and thought to yourself, maybe I'll just do it tomorrow? Then tomorrow turns into next week and next week becomes next month. I used to be like that. I waited until I was in the mood. I believed I had to feel ready, excited, and full of energy, then I could begin. But I was wrong. And I paid for it with years of procrastination. One day I realized inspiration isn't what makes you take action. Action is what creates inspiration. It's like pushing a stationary car. At first it's heavy, stiff, and barely move. But if you keep pushing for just a few more seconds, the wheels start to turn and momentum begins to carry you forward. Life works the same way. Most people stop at the stage of not feeling like doing it. But successful people, they still move, still act, still push forward, even when they feel empty inside. And I realized that the secret of discipline doesn't lie in temporary energy, but in the ability to act even when emotion doesn't support you. That's what true discipline is. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 golden principles that will help you take consistent action even on your worst days. The very principles that help me turn procrastination into momentum and turn not in the mood into can't stop now. And you should stay until the end, because principle number 9, turning I don't want to into a chance to train my willpower, is the secret most people overlook. And it's also the reason why they never break through. So let's start with the first principle, the foundation of all discipline. Don't wait for inspiration to come, act to summon it. Principle number 1, don't wait for inspiration, act to call it forth. I used to believe that to accomplish something great, I first needed to feel inspired. I waited for the days when energy surged, emotions flared, and my mind felt clear. I thought, when I'm inspired, I'll write. When I'm in the mood, I'll start. When I'm ready, I'll act. But the longer I waited, the weaker I became, because inspiration, it never comes when you're just sitting still. One morning, I decided to try something different. I stopped asking, do I feel inspired today? I simply told myself, just do it. Even if you don't want to. Even if your mind is blank, just start. I sat down and wrote a single line. The first line was terrible. The second one wasn't any better. But by the 10th, the 20th line, a wave of energy began to appear. Ideas started flowing. Emotions came back. And I realized that inspiration always comes after you begin. Inspiration isn't a flame that burns on its own. It's a spark created when you strike action against effort. Like rubbing your hands against a stone, friction creates fire. But if you just sit there staring at the stone, it will stay cold forever. Successful people understand this very well. They don't let emotions control action. They let action guide emotions. They know you don't need inspiration to start, but you need to start to have inspiration. I remember one of my students once told me, teacher, I want to start writing a book, but I'm not inspired. I asked, have you ever opened your laptop and typed a few lines? She laughed. No, because I'm afraid it'll be bad. I smiled and said, you'll always be afraid of writing badly unless you allow yourself to write badly the first time. A week later, she sent me her first draft. It wasn't perfect, but it was real because it was the first one she actually acted on. You see, inspiration is like a special guest. It only knocks when you've already started cleaning your house. If you just sit and wait, your house will remain messy, and that guest will never come. Remember, action creates momentum. Momentum creates emotion. Emotion fuels the next action. That's the circle of consistency. Try it right now. Don't wait until you're in a better mood. Have more time or everything feels perfect. Just stand up and start, even if it's the smallest step. Because starting doesn't require inspiration, but stopping will kill it. A question for you, what are you putting off? Just because you don't feel like it. And if you did it in the next 5 minutes, what might change? And once you understand that inspiration comes from action, you'll need to learn something equally important, how to maintain action when your emotions fade. Because emotions are waves, but consistent people are rocks. Let's move on to the second principle. Principle number 2. Emotions are waves, consistent people are rocks. I once had a student named Michael. Whenever he felt energetic, he worked nonstop, forgetting to eat or sleep, and achieved amazing results. But the moment something went wrong, a bit of criticism, a small failure, he immediately gave up. He said, I'm not in the mood to do it anymore. I need to feel good first. I smiled, put my hand on his shoulder, and said, Michael, emotions are waves, but you must become the rock. Human emotions always change. They rise, fall, strengthen, and weaken. If you let yourself drift with your emotions, you'll never reach the shore. Today you feel motivated, so you work. Tomorrow you feel lazy, so you rest. And what happens? You keep circling in the same waves, never getting anywhere. Consistent people don't deny their emotions. They recognize them, accept them, but don't let them take control. Like a rock in the ocean, it can't stop the waves from coming, but it stands firm. The waves may crash and erode it, but they can't shake its foundation. Likewise, consistent people don't try to kill negative emotions. They build strong systems so they won't be swept away by them. I've had days like that too, days when I didn't want to see anyone talk or do anything. But instead of letting those emotions lead, I let principles lead. I didn't ask, do I feel like it? I asked, what needs to be done today? And I did it even when my emotions protested. The result, my emotions began to change. When I acted, my mind regained calm. And emotions, instead of being the commander, became companions. In today's world, this is more important than ever. Gen Z grows up surrounded by emotional stimulation, social media, news drama, endless noise. They're constantly pulled by emotional waves, and they think, only when I feel good is it worth doing, only when I have the mood should I start. But success doesn't belong to those in the mood. It belongs to those who act even when they're not. If you let emotions decide your actions, you're handing the steering wheel of your life to a drunk driver. But if you let principles lead, you'll always stay on course even in the storm. Ask yourself, when was the last time you let your emotions stop you from doing what needed to be done? And if you had acted that day anyway, would your life look different today? Learn to stand firm amidst the waves. Don't try to drive away negative emotions. Learn to work with them. Because emotions are only strong when you resist them, but when you keep moving forward, they lose their power. Be the rock in your own life. Because waves will come and go, but the consistent ones remain. And once you've learned to stay steady amid emotional waves, the next thing you need to learn is to start small, because no one climbs a mountain without first laying the first brick. Let's move on to the third principle, start with the smallest step possible. Principle number 3, start with the smallest step possible. I once had a friend named Daniel. He always said, Jim, I want to change my life. I want to read more, exercise, and build my own career. But for months he did nothing. When I asked why, he said, I'm waiting until I have enough time and energy to do it properly. I told him, Daniel, that's the most common mistake. No one starts with perfection. Successful people don't wait to be ready. They start small, then grow bigger. Starting small doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart. Because the hardest part isn't doing a lot, it's starting at all. When you start, you break through the biggest mental barrier, inertia. I remember the first morning I decided to change my life. I didn't run 5 kilometers or read 100 pages. I just stood up and made my bed. It seemed meaningless, but it sent a signal to my mind that said, I'm in control of today. And when I finished that small task, I did another, then another. By the end of the day, I realized I had completely shifted my energy. The power of small actions lies in momentum. You don't need to start big, you just need to start now. Because when you move, the universe moves with you. I often tell my students, if you can't do 10 things, do 1. If you can't do 1 hour, do 5 minutes. What matters isn't the size of your action, it's that you take action. One student once told me, teacher, I want to learn English, but every time I open the book, I get scared. I asked, can you learn just 1 word today? He was surprised. Only 1 word, I nodded. He agreed. A month later, he had learned 150 words. More importantly, he had won his first battle with himself on day 1. Successful people don't differ from you in ability. They differ in their ability to start, no matter how small. Each small action is a brick. Every properly placed brick becomes the foundation of a great building. You can't build a castle in 1 day, but you can lay 1 brick right now. I once heard a quote that I really love. The way to eat an elephant is 1 bite at a time. And the way to change your life is to start with the smallest thing you can do today. Don't wait for energy. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just take the step. Because the first step, no matter how small, still takes you closer to your goal than standing still. What small thing can you do today that takes only 5 minutes but could change the direction of your life? And once you've learned to start small, the next thing you must learn is to stop asking too many questions. Because sometimes the very question, should I do it, is the reason you stay stuck. Let's move on to the 4th principle. Principle number 4, stop asking, should I do it? Just do it. I used to ask myself that question hundreds of times. Should I start today? Should I call this client? Should I keep writing this book? And you know what? Every time I asked, I procrastinated. Because that question doesn't seek an answer, it seeks an excuse. The more you ask, the more chances you give your mind to negotiate with laziness. You start thinking, I'm tired, I'll do it tomorrow, it's not the right time. And then you lose. Not because you don't know what to do, but because you asked the wrong question. A disciplined person doesn't ask, Should I do it? They say, it's time to do it. Because they understand principles are not meant to be negotiated. I remember one winter morning I had to get up at 5 a.m. to give a speech in another state. It was cold and rainy outside. All I wanted was to stay curled up in bed. I thought, should I skip today? The moment that question appeared, I jumped up. I knew if I allowed myself to ask, I'd allow myself to lose. So I didn't give my mind that chance. I got up, I got ready, I went. That speech turned out to be one of the best of my life. And I learned this lesson: if you want to take control of your life, don't let your emotions control the questions you ask. The question, should I do it, is the most subtle trap of procrastination. It makes you think you're being thoughtful, but in truth, you're just finding a way to avoid taking action. Ordinary people ask in order to delay. Successful people act in order to understand. They don't wait for enough information, enough energy, or enough confidence because they know only action clarifies the path. It's like driving at night. You can't see the entire road, but with your headlights on, you can see the first 100 meters. And once you drive that distance, you'll see the next 100 meters. Life is the same. Don't wait for the whole road to be lit. Just start driving. I had a student named Sarah. She always hesitated before starting a new project. I'm afraid of making mistakes, she said. I told her, Sarah, mistakes won't kill you. Hesitation will. A month later, she sent me her first project plan, even though it wasn't perfect. And I said, good. You just did what 97% of people never do: start without waiting for certainty. You see, every time you stop asking, should I do it, and just do it, you're training your discipline reflex. Once that reflex becomes strong enough, you'll no longer need motivation, because you'll have become someone who acts on principle, not on emotion. If you find these lessons awakening something inside, you hit subscribe so we can continue this journey together. Because building discipline isn't a one-day task. It's a path we walk together, one small step at a time. When was the last time you asked yourself, should I do it? And if you had stopped asking and just done it, would your results look different today? Emotions will always tell you rest for 5 more minutes, but discipline will say, no, it's time. And in that very moment, you're winning over yourself. And once you've learned to stop negotiating with yourself, it's time to understand something deeper. Relying on willpower alone isn't enough, because willpower is like a battery. It runs out. To stay consistent, you must build systems that make you act even when your energy is gone. Let's move on to the 5th principle. Principle number 5, systems beat emotions. I used to believe that with a strong enough will, I could change anything. I read dozens of books, wrote down my goals, and plastered them all over my walls. The first week I did great. The second week I got tired. By the third week, I fell back into old habits. I blamed myself. I'm not determined enough. But the truth was, it wasn't a lack of willpower. It was a lack of systems. Willpower is like a battery. It's powerful, but limited. You can use it to start, but you can't run the entire journey on it. If you rely completely on emotion and willpower, once the battery runs out, you stop. But if you have a system, it keeps you going, even when motivation disappears. I remember a student named Ethan. He always complained about lacking discipline. I try so hard, teacher. I make plans, I post my goals everywhere, but after a few days, I pick up my phone and forget everything. I asked Ethan, what does your workspace look like? He said, messy, lots of papers everywhere, and I usually work from my bedroom. I smiled. That's not a willpower problem, that's a system problem. I told Ethan, clean your desk. Put your goal notebook right in the center. Turn off your phone notifications before sitting down. And most importantly, pick one fixed time each day, no matter how busy, and do it. A month later, Ethan came back and said, teacher, I still have days when I'm not in the mood, but I no longer have to fight my emotions. When the time comes, I just sit down and action happens naturally. That's the power of systems. When you have a clear environment, habits, and schedule, action becomes automatic, no longer dependent on feeling motivated. Look around you. Successful people all have clear systems, fixed wake-up time, fixed study hours, fixed work routines. They don't need to decide whether to act because the system decides for them. Meanwhile, unsuccessful people let emotions decide everything. If I feel good today, I'll do it. If I'm tired, I'll rest. And then they wonder why they never make progress. If you want consistent action, create an environment that forces you to be disciplined. Want to read more? Place your book where you can see it easily. Want to exercise? Keep your running shoes next to your bed. Want to write? Keep your document open before going to sleep, so in the morning you just sit down and continue. When your environment leads willpower isn't needed. When your system runs emotions no longer rule. Is the system around you today helping you move forward or holding you back? Remember, willpower starts, systems sustain. Discipline defeats emotion. When you have a system, you don't need to fight every day because your environment fights for you. And once your system helps you stay consistent, it's time to turn those repeated actions into something sacred. Because if you're just doing things to get them done, you'll soon get bored. But if you can turn boredom into ritual, you'll find joy in even the smallest steps. Let's move on to the sixth principle. Principle number 6, turn habits into rituals. I once said, if you can't avoid boredom, make it an art. Because most actions that lead to success are repetitive, monotonous, and sometimes dull. Waking up early, working out, reading, working hard day after day, no fireworks, no music, no applause. Just you and repetition. And that's exactly where most people quit. They think I need something new to stay motivated. But the truth is motivation doesn't come from change. It comes from the meaning you give to repetition. I once had a student named Claire. She worked in finance, a dull job filled with numbers, spreadsheets, and reports. She told me, "Teacher, every day feels like copy-paste. I've lost my drive." I asked, "Do you see your work as an obligation or as a ritual?" She was surprised. "What's the difference?" I said. An obligation is something you do because you have to. A ritual is something you do with reverence. I told her to start each morning by writing one line. "Today I do this work to become a more valuable person." Just one line. But it changed everything. Because she no longer saw her work as a burden, but as part of her personal growth journey. 3 months later, she came back and said, "Teacher, my job hasn't changed, but I have. I feel peace in repetition." You see, success doesn't come from constant change. It comes from meaningful repetition. Morning isn't just waking up, it's the start of a new chapter. Reading isn't just learning more, it's nourishing your soul. Exercise isn't just training your body, it's an act of gratitude toward it. When you see small actions as rituals, you no longer need excitement because you have meaning. Each habit becomes a symbol of your commitment, and that sense of reverence is what gives you endurance. I often tell my students, choose the 3 most important actions in your day and do them with full presence like a ritual. It could be reading 10 pages in the morning, dinner with your family, or 15 minutes writing down what you're grateful for. If you perform those acts with sacred intention, your habits stop feeling mechanical and start becoming rituals of growth. What's something you do every day that feels like an obligation, but if you added meaning to it, could become a ritual that helps you grow? Discipline is the foundation, but ritual is the soul of consistency. When you turn the ordinary into the sacred, boredom disappears and only joy and progress remains. And once you've learned to turn habits into rituals, the next thing to remember is don't chase perfection. Because the consistent ones aren't perfect people, they're the ones who appreciate every small step forward. Let's move on to the 7th principle. Principle number 7, focus on progress, not perfection. I used to be a perfectionist. Every time I started a project, I wanted everything to be flawless, every word precise, every layout impeccable, every result impressive. But that perfectionism kept me from ever starting. I remember the first time I wanted to publish a book. I spent months just editing the first chapter. I kept tearing up drafts, rewriting, and tearing them up again. A friend told me, "Jim, you don't need to write a perfect book. You just need to write a chapter that's better than yesterday." That sentence changed the way I work forever. Perfection is the enemy of progress. It makes you believe that if you can't do it perfectly, don't do it at all. But success doesn't belong to those who do things perfect. It belongs to those who improve patiently day by day. You may not be perfect today, but if you're 1% better than yesterday, then in a year, you'll have completely transformed your life. I had a student named Olivia. She wanted to start her own business, but never launched her product because it wasn't good enough yet. I asked, "Do you know what Apple's first product looked like?" She shook her head. I smiled. It was ugly, rough, and full of flaws. But they launched it, learned, and improved. If they had waited for perfection, there would be no Apple today. She was silent for a moment, then said, "I understand now, teacher. I'll start even if it's not perfect." 3 months later, Olivia came back smiling brightly. "Teacher, it's not perfect, but it works. And I've learned more in 3 months of action than in 3 years of planning." You see, perfectionism is fear in disguise. It makes you procrastinate while pretending you're preparing. But consistent people don't need perfection to start. They start to become perfect along the way. When you focus on progress, you begin to feel small victories. Every day, every line you write, every workout you complete, Every lesson you learn, each one is a small win. And those small wins, when compounded, create the unstoppable strength of consistency. If you let go of the fear of imperfection, what could you start today? And if you improve just 1% every day, what would your life look like a year from now? Don't let perfectionism stop you from living your potential. Remember, perfection is an illusion. Progress is real. Success doesn't need perfection. It needs persistence. And when you've learned to appreciate every small step forward, the next thing you must understand is that there will be days when you're tired, when your energy is drained and your spirit feels heavy. But don't stop. Learn to do less, not nothing. Let's move on to the 8th principle. Principle number 8. When you're tired, do less, don't stop. I once met a man named Robert, a hard worker who pushed himself to exhaustion. He told me he had spent 6 months building his business, but by the 7th month, he felt completely empty. No energy, no motivation, no desire to continue. He said, "Jim, maybe I should take a break." I asked Robert, "Are you tired or are you exhausted because you stopped?" He went silent. Then I said, "If you stop, you'll have to start all over again. But if you simply do less, you'll keep your rhythm." That's the secret of consistent people. When they're tired, they don't quit. They slow down. They don't shut off the engine. They switch to power-saving mode. You see, even the strongest engines need rest, but coming to a complete stop makes you lose momentum. A small step forward is still a step forward. A day of intentional rest is very different from a day of giving up. Consistent people know that difference well. They know when to slow down and when to never stop completely. I remember a time when I was overwhelmed with speaking engagements. I was constantly traveling and I burned out. My body protested and my mind wanted to quit. But instead of canceling my events, I told myself, "Jim, you don't need to speak at 100% today. Speak at 70%, but do it with your whole heart." And surprisingly, within minutes of stepping on stage, my energy came back. Because when you keep acting even a little, the flow of life inside you keeps moving. Stop completely and you lose connection with yourself. The modern world makes it easy to burn out. Pressure, information, overload, comparison, expectations, they all pile up. So you must learn how to rest without quitting. Slow down, but don't step off the track. Turn rest into part of the process, not the end point. Can't read 20 pages, read 2. Can't work out for an hour, walk for 10 minutes. Can't write a full chapter, write 1 paragraph. As long as you don't stop completely, a small flame can always rekindle the fire as long as you don't let it go out. When was the last time you felt tired? Did you stop completely or just do less? If you can't do much today, what's the smallest thing you can still do? Remember, the weak stop when tired, the strong rest to continue, the consistent scale down but never give up. You don't have to be strong all the time, you just have to not let go. Because as long as you keep moving, you're still moving forward. And when you've learned to maintain your rhythm even in exhaustion, it's time to discover a deeper level of strength where not wanting to do it becomes an opportunity to train your willpower. Let's move on to the 9th principle. Principle number 9, turn I don't want to into an opportunity to train your willpower. One cold winter morning, I woke up and didn't want to do anything. It was freezing outside, and in my head, a voice whispered, "Jim, it's okay to take a day off." And you know what? I almost listened to that voice. But right then, I remembered something I'd said years ago. Every time you do what you don't want to do, you're training your willpower. I jumped out of bed, put on my jacket, and started running. Each step wasn't just physical exercise, it was mental training. I was telling myself I control my emotions. My emotions don't control me. You see, we all have those don't feel like it days. Don't want to study, don't want to work, don't want to push any further. But those are the days that separate the ordinary from the extraordinary. Ordinary people stop when they don't feel like it. Consistent people act especially in that moment because they understand every time they push past laziness, they upgrade themselves. Imagine you're lifting weights at the gym. Each time you lift, your muscles tear slightly, then heal back stronger. Your mind works the same way. Every time you overcome, I don't want to, your willpower is trained becoming stronger, sharper, and more resilient. I once had a student named Kevin, a young programmer. He told me, "Teacher, I have big goals, but some days I just don't want to do anything." I asked, "And what do you do on those days?" He said, "I rest because I think resting will bring back motivation." I smiled. Kevin, rest isn't wrong. But if you always rest whenever you don't feel like doing something, you're teaching your brain that emotions have authority. I told him, "Try working for just 10 minutes on the days you have no motivation." Just 10 minutes. A month later, he said, "Teacher, those 10 minutes changed my life because after 10 minutes, I didn't want to stop anymore. I realized emotions are only strong for the first 5 minutes." That's why I always tell my students, when you don't want to do something that's not a signal to stop, it's a signal to train. The feeling of not wanting to is the gym of your willpower. And if you have the courage to walk into that gym every day, you'll become unstoppable. The next time you feel like not doing it, will you give in or see it as a chance to strengthen yourself? If you overcome just one, I don't want a moment every day, how powerful will you become after a year? Discipline isn't just doing the right thing. It's doing the right thing, especially when you don't feel like it. And each time you do, you carve a permanent truth into your mind: I am the one in control of my life. And once you've learned to turn "I don't want to" into training opportunities, it's time to reach the deepest foundation of consistency, to remember why you started. Because when motivation fades, your purpose and values will guide you. Let's move on to the final principle. Principle number 10, remember why you started. There was a time in my life when I thought I'd lost all motivation. A packed schedule, work pressure, criticism, back-to-back failures, everything drained me. One evening, I sat alone in an empty room, staring at the goal sheet pinned to my wall, and felt nothing. I asked myself, "Jim, why did I start this journey?" The answer came slowly but clearly: because I was once a failure, and I don't want others to walk that path alone. At that moment, I realized motivation doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. It comes from your reason for existing. And that reason is stronger than any temporary emotion. When you forget why you started, everything feels heavy, meaningless, and easy to abandon. But when you remember, you can push through even the darkest days. You don't exercise just to look good. You exercise to be healthy, to live longer, to watch your children grow up. You don't work just to earn money. You work to create value, to provide a better life for those you love. You don't study just to get grades. You study to open doors to your future. Your deeper reason is what lifts you up when everything else falls apart. I once told a student, "Don't just write your goals, write the reasons behind them." He asked, "Why is that so important?" I replied, "Because when you're tired, you won't reread your goals. But if you see your reason, you'll rise." A year later, he came back and said, "Teacher, there were many days I wanted to quit. But every time I remembered why I started, I kept going. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth it." When you remember why you started, even the smallest task gains meaning. Every morning becomes not an obligation, but an opportunity to get closer to what you believe in. Consistent people aren't stronger, they're clearer about their reason, their values, their direction. Those who give up easily aren't weak, they're lost from their reason. Why did you start your journey? And if you're tired today, close your eyes and ask yourself, is that reason still big enough to keep me going? When motivation disappears, return to your roots. When emotions run dry, listen to your heart, because only meaning can hold you steady through the years. The one who has a strong enough reason can overcome any challenge. The one who has none will stop before the challenge even begins. And those are the 10 principles that will help you act even without motivation, the journey of building discipline, inner strength, and true consistency. If what I've shared resonates with you, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I act every day to remind yourself to keep moving forward. Because success doesn't come from what you do when you feel motivated, it comes from what you keep doing when you don't. And I want to end with a quote. I deeply believe in discipline is the bridge between dreams and success. So keep walking slowly, tiredly, but never stop. I'll see you in the next video where together we'll explore the true power of consistency.